Hello students, how are you all doing? Are you seeing red? Are you feeling blue? Well then, this is the class for you. Oh, and I didn't mean to rhyme that time. Just kidding, of course I did. Anyway, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm very excited to cover Aboras and belina, the monsters the majority of you voted for out of the 16 entries in my March Monster Madness competition this year in my community tab. These popular monsters have made a fair amount of appearances within the Ultraman series, so since there's a lot to talk about, let's jump right into their origin story. This may be hard to believe, considering how closely the histories of these two monsters are intertwined, but there was actually a time when only one of them existed. In the initial draft for what would become their debut episode, written by Masahiro Yamada and then called The Messenger from the Last Century, only Aboras was present. One source says that this draft called him a, quote, liquid monster controlled by people from the previous century, and also said that he was usually kept in a small bottle. You could tell that this is eventually going to become the episode that we ended up with, but the description seems to have differences too. Apparently these early plans for Aboras were used as an inspiration for creating Ultra 7's capsule monsters, one of whom was the focus of my last Ultraman series kaiju bio. This Aboras would have been destroyed by some melee attacks after Ultraman reflected his acid. Later on down the line, Samaji Nanagase, who directed a good amount of Ultraman series episodes and worked on a few scripts as well, decided to make some big changes to Masahiro Yamada's work, and stuck a second monster into the story, making the battle between this new kaiju and the older one a major focus of the episode. Both Aboras and belina were designed by head Ultraman designer Tol Narita. He designed belina after a seahorse and based Aboras' head off of a dinosaur skull. However, he didn't really do much designing when it came to the rest of Aboras. Have you ever seen a monster with ridges like that before? Yep, that's right, Subaraya Productions modified the suit of our old friend Red King to make Aboras, probably to save money. The Generation 1 Red King was painted blue and given a new head, and they called it a day. belina, on the other hand, was given a totally new costume, modeled by the man, the myth, the legend, Ryosaku Takayama. I believe Takayama sculpted Aboras' new head as well. It seems both of these monsters' heads survived for quite a long time, though they had deteriorated pretty badly by the time these pictures were taken. Despite Aboras definitely being the lazier suit, I think his unique, goofy face really carries the design a long way, and based on this poll I put out, he definitely seems to be the more popular of the two. belina is kind of ugly, but I think we can all agree that they are both at their best when they're together, battling to the death. The Aboras costume was worn by Haruyoshi Nakamura some of the time, and Kunio Suzuki at other points. belina was played by Yasuhiro Tajiri. I happened upon a surprising amount of behind-the-scenes images of the monster suits, including belina hanging out in a vegetable patch for some reason. Helping yourself to some cabbage, big guy? Try as I might, I couldn't find any info on where these monsters get their names, which, by the way, can be spelled in several different ways in English. The origin of their roars, though, is much easier to figure out. Aboras gets his straight from the Toho monster Varan, and belina's cry is a sped-up Anguirus roar. Alright, it's finally time for the battle of the century. Aboras versus belina. Let the fight begin! Or, in other words, let's check out their in-universe history in Ultraman 1966 now. A construction company contacted the SSSP following the discovery of a mysterious capsule on a plot of land they'd been digging up, and the team headed out to check out exactly what this unusual artifact was. There were extremely ancient fossils on this capsule from long before recorded history, which pointed to it having been built by an incredibly ancient civilization, and it was thought to be some kind of time capsule. One half of the metal object had been broken and was empty, while the other side contained a big mysterious vial of liquid in a metal tray of some sort. Scientists took both items to try and identify them, and the construction crew got back to work, unknowingly digging up a second vial of liquid that had been in the broken part of the capsule and transporting it elsewhere, leaving it exposed to the elements. This couldn't be good. Meanwhile, the metal plate was found to have writing on it, and scientists began working to translate it, while a mineral testing lab concentrated on trying to break open the first vial to study the liquid, which, fortunately for them, was easier said than done. I say fortunately because, as the writing on the metal plate mentioned, this liquid was actually one of two liquefied monsters that an ancient civilization had captured and buried deep underground in the capsule. The message ended with a warning that the vials must never be opened again, or humanity would perish. Sadly, by the time this message was translated, it was already too late. An unseasonal lightning storm began brewing in the exact same location as the undiscovered vial, and a bolt of lightning ended up striking the object, breaking it open. Upon being released, the red substance inside suddenly materialized, and belina appeared. The red monster went into destruction mode, and try as they might to destroy the beast with rockets, the SSSP couldn't bring him down. But soon their troubles would be doubled when the mineral testing lab finally succeeded in blasting the other vial open. Bye, mineral testing lab. You will be missed. Aboras wasted no time in showing the world his signature move, a foaming acidic mist, which could melt buildings away.
It's more than soap. It's power wash.
Ha ha, ha ha.
Upon learning that they now had another kaiju to deal with, the SSSP left Benila to the military, which is never a good idea, and returned to base to form a plan, as Benila burned the military planes to a crisp, and Aboras just got to go wherever he wanted unprovoked. With no Ultraman around, for some reason, why put off transforming, Hayata? Things were not going well for Japan. But fortunately, there was one little sliver of hope. Aboras and Benila are enemies. They can't stand each other. Perhaps there was a chance that the two could get into a fight and one could take out the other and cut the problem in half. Well, it didn't take long for Aboras and Benila to locate each other, and a fight did indeed break out, right outside Tokyo's Olympic Stadium. The two began grappling each other, and Benila slammed Aboras into the side of the stadium. Moments later, they were up again in the middle of the arena, and this time Aboras shoved Benila on the ground. He tried to quickly finish his rival with his mist, but Benila rolled away and countered with fire. Their two weapons met in the middle in a primitive beam lock and canceled each other out, so the two returned to close quarters combat, and Aboras bit Benila with his huge mouth. Meanwhile, the SSSP had finally gotten into position and shot Benila in the back of the neck. He didn't seem too affected, but soon after this he got pushed to the ground by his blue foe again. After briefly attacking Aboras, which was ineffective, the Science Patrol aimed at Benila again as he tried to return to his feet and hit his eye with a rocket, knocking him right back down again. The badly hurt red monster roared in agony, and seeing his opponent's predicament, Aboras hit Benila with his acidic mist as he lay on the ground. The red creature didn't roll away this time, and soon he was covered in foam.
I'm melting!
Benila was reduced to a glob of soap, and Aboras got his Olympic gold medal. So now the SSSP only had one monster to fight again, but their guns were unfortunately all out of energy. Luckily, Hayata's beta capsule wasn't, and he used it to transform into Ultraman. By the way, I didn't mention this in the behind the scenes section, but one source says that Ultraman was originally going to fight both Aboras and Benila, and a different ending to this fight where Ultraman obliterated Aboras with his Ultra Slash was also planned. But now let's see the actual finished fight. Aboras made the first move and fired his mist at the Ultra Hero, but Ultraman dodged and kicked the monster, but it seems this hurt him more than the monster. Aboras charged in and tried to attack Ultraman while he was down, but after some struggling, the hero was able to break free. Oh, hey, I can make some money. I see a greenback. Moments after Ultraman pushed Aboras away, the monster fired his mist again, before Ultraman could shoot his Spacium beam, and this time the hero wasn't able to dodge Aboras' attack. Uh-oh, are we about to get a new Ultraman-scented soap? Luckily, no, a bunch of the foam suddenly flew off his body, but his color timer began blinking, indicating his time was running out. Aboras charged at the hero again, but after a series of chops, Ultraman was able to throw the monster into the stands. This next sequence really demonstrates how sturdy Aboras was. He quickly responded with another blast of his acid, but Ultraman dodged it and fired his Spacium beam, which caused a little damage, but Aboras was somehow able to take the hit. Aboras tried to hit Ultraman again. Again the hero dodged and fired his Spacium beam, and again the tough creature took the hit. The persistent Aboras fired his acid a third time, but he missed again, and this time for Ultraman, the third time was the charm, and Aboras exploded when the Spacium beam connected. Even though it didn't end well for him, you've got to hand it to Aboras here. He proved to be a really hard monster to take down. Once filming for this episode ended, Aboras and Benila parted ways for a while to journey on separate paths. Aboras went back to being Red King for the Ultraman episode Mystery Comet Suifon, see my complete history of Red King video, while Benila joined a totally new show, Tsuburaya's Kaiju Buska, and became the villainous Imola. It seems both monsters swapped out heads for these new roles, which is probably why their old heads were able to stick around for a while. Also, before becoming Imola, new footage of Benila actually getting to fight Ultraman was reportedly shot to play on a TBS show called Young 720, when Ultraman's suit actor, Ben Furuya, appeared as a guest on the program, I guess to show what Furuya was capable of. I couldn't find footage of this battle unfortunately, but if any of you students know more about it, or anything else I mentioned in this video, please leave a comment. Aboras and Benila had gone their separate ways, but they never forgot their hatred for each other, and eventually a certain show would provide them with an opportunity to duke it out again. And that show was an anime. The Ultraman anime. As you know, I'm more of a tokusatsu guy myself, but we've got to do what we've got to do. Remember in the history of Red King when we covered Red King's appearance in this same show? Well, Aboras and belina were also in that episode, because that's the one they decided to put the majority of the returning creatures in for some reason. Both of their designs were changed somewhat, with Aboras becoming green, for example. In this episode, a group of Sajin called the alien Baradons rode a meteorite called Baradon to Earth, intent on conquering the planet, and landed the meteorite in the sea. The aliens had gathered a large assortment of returning Ultraman monsters, which they intended to use to subdue Earth. Aboras and belina were among these monsters. Unfortunately for the alien Baradons, the kaiju were far more interested in battling amongst themselves than helping with their conquest effort, and this of course applied to Aboras and belina too. The moment these two reached the surface of this meteorite island, they immediately began dueling each other. Very little was shown of the two monsters, and Ultraman Jonius made quick work of them in the final battle when they briefly showed their faces. But they'd returned, and their animosity toward each other was still strong. Let's see if we can do better than an anime this time. Oh. Is this an improvement? I don't think this is an improvement. Ultraman the Ultimate Hero is not a very good show. But hey, it's really funny. For the wrong reasons. Like a bunch of other monsters from Ultraman 1966, Aboras and belina made their grand returns to live-action Ultraman in this show, sporting brand new powered designs created by Mahiro Maeda. Maeda's new design for Aboras was inspired in part by prehistoric armored fish and by T-Rexes, and the updated belina apparently took even more inspiration from seahorses. It seems that instead of getting powered in front of their names, these two updated kaiju would have been called Aboras 2 and belina 2 originally. But eventually their new names overpowered the old ones. Hiroshi Yamaguchi and Bud Robertson were responsible for the script that brought the two monsters back. Kevin Hudson apparently modeled their new suits, and it seems two of the people on this list were the ones who wore these costumes. The last behind-the-scenes note is that a pump was used for the scenes where Aboras used his foam. Okay, Ultraman the Ultimate Hero, we're giving you another chance, for some reason. What do you have for us today? One day, DWP Water contacted the Winter team about a weird sarcophagus-like thing they discovered following a bunch of rain, which appeared when the water went down. Winter took it back to base and began studying it vigorously, eager to determine what secrets this 3,000-year-old object contained. Then they took it oh, wait, that looks like Colonel Sanders. The Colonel helped one member of Winter decipher the writing on the sarcophagus, which, again, talked about how a monster had been captured inside and do not open this. So, Colonel Sanders proceeded to start trying to open it. The lock could only be opened by a certain type of sound, which the doctor had begun playing. But then when Teresa Beck told him to shut it down, he said,
I did. Told to stop.
What exactly do you want to happen, Colonel? Do you want to open it or not? Maybe he was just hoping there'd be a new fried chicken recipe inside. Meanwhile, based on the Vedic text on the sarcophagus, Winter now knew that a second coffin existed somewhere, and finding the other one immediately became a priority for the team, even though it hadn't been causing any trouble for 3,000 years. Well, I guess it makes sense to be concerned, since its companion had just found its way to modern civilization. Winter used the heat signature of the first sarcophagus to find the missing one, but in one of the biggest coincidences of all time, they began their search for the second one just as two university students were busy breaking it open in a cave in Clearwater Canyon. They intended to talk about their discovery in a newspaper article and include pictures, but the loud camera flash was just what the vault needed to unleash what they didn't understand, the power that's inside. This light zoomed into an oddly square-shaped cliff and materialized into a monster who busted right back out again. Aboras was back. Meanwhile, no matter how hard Colonel Sanders typed, he couldn't get the sarcophagus he started opening to shut again, so he and Beck fled the room just before a red rectangle shot out of the coffin. Moments later, belina had joined the kaiju party. The two monsters, of course, had to get back to fighting each other as soon as possible, so they bumbled toward each other and began their battle near a football field. After the initial first few weak shoves, belina decided to turn things up a notch.
Talk about a heavyweight fight! Woo-hoo!
Is this really something to be excited about? Thousands of lives are currently at risk right now. After a little more close-range combat, Aboras decided it was time to quit messing around, and fired his acid at belila's belly, knocking his opponent to the ground. This little bit of the acid was enough to cause bubbles to foam up around the red monster, and moments later he was just gone. So now, all Winter had to do was eliminate Aboras, right? Well, we'll see about that. Winter's missiles did nothing to Aboras until they locked onto his mouth, and then they were able to knock him over. but only momentarily. So Colonel Sanders decided to create a sound attack to hit Aboras with. Meanwhile, Benila was somehow able to demelt himself and return to the fight, which didn't really shock anyone for some reason. So the two kaiju resumed their battle and also competed in a roaring competition. This madness had to come to an end, so it was around this time that Kenichi Kai transformed into Ultraman Powered to battle the red and blue monsters. Powered leapt around a bit as the fight began, and then gave Aboras a kick in the stomach, and did the same for Benila, but threw in a slap to the jaw. The red monster was knocked over, and Aboras just stood there, and Powered was like, wait, is this all I had to do? We then cut away from the match just long enough for Aboras, Benila, and Powered to get lined up for this next shot, where the Ultraman showily blocked both fire and acid, at the cost of his color timer beginning to flash. Oh, and getting a little blue. Meanwhile, Colonel Sanders had found the right sound frequency that would hurt the monsters, so Winter began blasting the sound, and the kaiju covered their, necks. It didn't instantly take them out, though, and Benila decided to fire back against Ultraman Powered with some more fire, so the Ultra did this pretty impressive flip, and Aboras got hit by the attack instead, so he retaliated with more acid, and Benila fell yet again. Powered then shoved Aboras and finished both him and Benila off with his Mega Spacium Beam. The two monsters haven't been seen in their powered forms since. But they have been seen since this. Let's jump to the new generation era of Ultraman. There is a lineup of popular monsters that, starting during the time of Max and Mabius, and especially after that in the Ultra Galaxy and New Generation eras, Tsuburaya Productions likes to bring back constantly. Aboras and Benila are, for some reason, not part of that lineup yet, but they nevertheless were able to make 2 in-person appearances in the New Generation era main series shows. The first was a super brief appearance in the opening of Ultraman X, Episode 1, in which the two monsters could briefly be seen in Russia fighting each other. Because what else would they be doing? Their costumes shown for this shot were taken from the Eiji Tsuburaya Special Effects Trajectory exhibition, and probably weren't really intended for TV use, so they only got to appear here as a cameo. Ultraman Trigger New Generation Tiga, however, brought the two monsters back for a much more major role. In episode 21 of Trigger, written by Jun Sugita, Aboras and Benila got to make their true, big, not just a cameo return to the main Ultraman series, and were portrayed once again with suits that initially were being used for a different purpose. They were apparently on display at Ultraman Festival events before being drafted into the show. Benila was played by Kenji Kajikawa, and Aboras was brought to the screen by Hiroyuki Arai, who we already determined in this video is a human Red King, so it makes sense he would also be called on to play Red King's blue clone. Okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger on the in-universe history. And that is such an obvious joke, I don't even know if it counts as one. Anyway, here we go. This episode begins with showing us a little clip of Trigger fighting Baragiler, which happened in the previous episode. And in this opening, we got to see that during this fight, a stray blast of electricity entered this building and caused a capsule of blue liquid and a capsule of red liquid to become unstable. I have absolutely no idea what those things could be. These 350 million year old artifacts had both been dug up separately the year before the events of this episode. Aware that the liquid inside was actually a pair of liquefied monsters, Guts Select was instructed to transport the capsule to the Nurse Dese, while the research center Baragiler hit with his lightning was being repaired. But before Guts Select could do anything, the spherical capsule suddenly flared up from being so unstable, and a cloud of blue mist escaped the building and transformed into Aboras. To remind everyone of his special ability, the kaiju immediately fired his acidic mist at a building, melting it in mere moments and causing a giant glob of bubbles to begin spreading. Akito began firing at the monster, but had to be saved from the big wave of soap by Kingo, who sacrificed himself to save his friend. At least Trigger got to die clean, I guess. Kingo's friends thought he was still alive though for some reason, but we'll get back to that. Anyway, in the confusion, Benila figured, why don't I escape now too? So he did. Aboras' reaction to seeing him was really funny. He saw his rival out of the corner of his eye, looked away, slow to realize what he'd seen, and then his brain finally processed what had come in through his eyes, and he roared furiously. Benila then went through the exact same process, and the old enemies went at it again, grappling each other with every ounce of muscle they could muster. Both sides were pretty evenly matched, and eventually Benila was able to hurl his blue foe to the ground, and pulled him up like a wrestler. But soon, Aboras had turned the tables and rammed Benila over. Then, things seemed pretty even again. Eventually, Aboras began spinning his opponent like a top, round and round extremely fast. Despite being incredibly dizzy, Benila was able to counter by turning on his fire breath, which lit Aboras on fire for a short amount of time, giving Benila a chance to stop spinning and get back into the brawl. This was short-lived, though, because Gut Select finally got their act together and tried to fire at the monsters. So Aboras and Benila decided to put their differences aside just long enough to chase the intruder away. That was probably the best for the defense team, though, honestly, because moments later, Gut Select learned that if they destroyed the kaiju, their poisonous blood would just make things worse. So what could possibly be done? Oh good, here comes Ultraman Trigger. Oh wait, that's Dark Trigger. Yep, Akito decided to risk letting their prisoner, Ignis, loose so he could try and save Kingo, if he could be saved. It's a lost cause, guys. We all saw what happened to him. Anyway, after transforming, Dark Trigger rammed both Aboras and Benila to the ground. He specifically wanted access to Benila's fire so he could burn away Aboras' foam, because this was the only way it could be cleared. Aboras and Benila, of course, didn't like interruptions, so they fought back, but they didn't forget their dislike for each other, which could easily be seen when Aboras used Benila as a shield to protect himself. Dark Trigger fought very well, and though his opponents got a few hits in, he was eventually able to force poor Benila to blast his fire down at the large puddle of Aboras' foam below. But that's just so useless. There's no way Kingo could have survived. Oh. He has a magic bubble? That's cheating! Trigger Dark needed some help dealing with the gruesome twosome, so Kingo decided to end his bubble nap and transform into normal Trigger. Aboras and Benila were slammed really hard, and moments after returning to their feet, were walloped back onto the ground from behind. Trigger and Trigger Dark quickly worked out which kaiju they would each take on, and both got to work battling, getting some strong blows in before falling back after the monsters used their ranged attacks. Then both Triggers decided it was finishing move time. Now, how could they do that without spreading the poison that was in the blood of the two kaiju? Well, they decided to just quickly wipe out the poison after they blew the monsters up to prevent any issues. Kind of a risky move in my opinion, but it did work out. And that's how the most recent major iterations of Aboras and Benila went down. I wonder when they'll show up next. Hope we don't have to wait 350 million years. I may not live that long. Anyway, let's cover minor appearances now. Some of Aboras and Benila's most notable minor appearances include both kaiju appearing as Spark Dolls in the Ultraman Ginga Theater Special, the Blue Monster appearing in the Monster Graveyard in Episode 21 of Ultraman Mebius, and both monsters being part of Belyudra in Ultra Galaxy Legends the movie. Aboras was not only present in his normal form, but in his powered form as well. Both monsters have appeared in mangas, video games, and stage shows too. You won't see them popping up nearly as frequently as kaiju like Red King or Zeton, but they're memorable enough that Tsuburaya Productions references them from time to time. Here's the full list of all their other minor appearances I am aware of. If you know of any more, please enter them in the comments. Now for monster merch. I'd say Bandai gets a B+ for their handling of Aboras and Benila. They could definitely give us a few more products, but what we do have now is totally acceptable. Here are the toys of the duo that I have collected so far. These two are from the older Ultra Monster series and are pretty rare, especially Aboras. And these two new Ultra Monster series guys were released just a few years ago to coincide with the monsters appearing in Ultraman Trigger. I've also got a smaller soft vinyl Benila. All these look quite nice, and there are some other good Aboras and Benila products besides these too. I am a big Ultra Monster series collector, so the most notable other ones to me are the rare figures featuring their designs from Ultraman Powered. But there are also Gashapon versions, this diorama featuring both of the two rivals, and various other little versions to pick up. X Plus Aboras and Benila figures exist too, but they're incredibly rare and valuable, so the chances of snagging one for a good price aren't high at all. What you're seeing here are the Aboras and Benila figures I currently have available on my eBay store, which you can check out by clicking the link in the description. I've got hundreds more kaiju toys and other tokusatsu products available on there too, so be sure to check it out. And you know what else you should check out? My official, brand new Toku Professor merch. Yes, you heard right, you can now order official merchandise based on this channel by clicking the store tab next to the community tab. Or you can click this link too. I'm currently offering adult shirts, kids shirts, some mugs, etc. with different designs. You can even pick up a replica of Pencil Leopard's tank top shirt, or a Kashimu-kun pillow, or even a onesie for a baby. It's cool stuff, so check it out if you can. Proceeds help me produce more videos for you all. If you have ideas for more designs, please leave a comment and I'll consider them. And with that exciting announcement out of the way, I think it's time to bring this class to a close.
Help us, Professor!
Yep, I knew they were going to speak up at some point. What is it, kids?
I think this class about two rival monsters awakened our rivalry. Yeah, we're stuck in an endless loop of showing